Thank you, Zach, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm on the East Coast, so it's evening, but I'm not sure if it's afternoon for some of you. And I want to compliment Passive House Accelerator for the great tour that we did earlier this year. And Zach, I saw a YouTube video of your interview with Brad Mahoney. So I encourage everyone who wants to learn a little bit more about Winthrop Center to feel free to check that out. And I'd also point you to our website, www.winthropcenter.com, for even further and additional information. So with no further ado, Zach, I'm going to use my screen because I slightly updated the presentation from what I sent to Kim.
That's perfect.
There we go. So as Zach mentioned, Winthrop Center is in the heart of downtown Boston. And it's been developed by Millennium Partners. We are a US development company, and we have developed mixed use projects throughout the United States. We have not done anything international. Our product has been primarily luxury residential, often coupled with a major hotel brand. In the Boston area, because we as the local partner had office experience, we also did quite a bit of office work as well as historic preservation. It's kind of hard to develop in Boston without doing some type of historic preservation. So being very, very familiar with Boston, when an RFP came out for a site in the financial district that was a 4-story parking garage owned by the city of Boston, but in real disrepair. And matter of fact, it had been closed because it was structurally unsound. We competed for that development. And I think part of that competition led us to go beyond and really try to do something that would excite the city. We were working with Handel Architects, as well as, at the time it was Vidaris, today it's their Socotec, and Stephen Winters. I will credit that team with suggesting the Passive House idea for Boston. They had just completed a project in Roosevelt Island for Cornell University, and they had done that successfully. Now that was a dormitory, so we were still looking at a very challenging project when we decided to do a project of this magnitude and make it Passive House. But it was a differentiator. And when you are competing for a site, you need to think beyond and you need to create these differentiators. So that was part of our motivation. And as we go through, I'll talk to you about how that decision really stood the test of time and has proven to be even a stronger decision than just to win the site. The site is located smack in the middle of downtown. Anyone who's familiar with Boston, Logan Airport is very close to the center city. You go through one of the tunnels and you're right in the financial district. South Station, which is a major rail line, and North Station both feed the city. And all of Boston's MBTA transits get you to within walking distance easily of Winthrop Center. So it became very obvious that this was a great place for a mixed use development. We decided to make the lower portion of the building office, partly because the views are somewhat compromised. And then the very top of the building was residential. Knowing that doing Passive House would be a challenge to exploit these views for the condominiums, we decided to focus the office portion on the Passive House criteria. It's 812,000 square feet, so it's still a very large commitment. Below the office, there is some amenity space, including what we call a connector, which is a public space. Those spaces are also not included in the Passive House. So one of the challenges was to convince Passive House International that they could look at a mixed use project in segments. It didn't have to be the whole building, that they could look at it as just the office portion and work with us to qualify that as a passive house. We came to terms with them as a quote pilot project, but they as the process has gone on and we've started to actually do testing and prove to ourselves, we all have realized that this model does work and it works quite well. And sometimes it's the only choice you have based on a lot of competing interest. And we'll get to a little bit more why I say it that way. But when the building is complete, this is the office piece, right? From the top of this public connector area, right up to what is where the residential terraces are. We're fortunate because we have a structural transition here. So we have a 4-foot concrete mat slab way up in the air. And that helps us isolate the building between residential and office. So we could conduct a lot of the testing in this portion of the building while this portion is still being built. On the ground floor, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of backdrop as to what else the project is all about, because it isn't really just one item that made Winthrop Center so exciting. It's the way we took all of these ideas and mixed them together, and they all somewhat rely on each other. So one of the requirements of the city RFP was to have public space. This connector will serve as our we call it a POP, privately owned public space. There's the office component and the residential lobbies, both separate and private. As you might expect, we would need to do that even just for security. There's a park that will be owned by the city, but needs to be constructed and maintained by us as the developer. So as we got into, what are the attributes of Winthrop Center, in addition to being a passive house, we realized that we were really 99% of the way there for a well building. So we are going to be the first well office building in Boston to be gold certified. And passive house, by its nature, tends to make healthier buildings because of the thermal comfort requirements and because of all the additional fresh air that's required. And as you know, fresh air was kind of a ho-hum for us on the sales side until COVID struck. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to understand what fresh air was all about and were asking questions. So we actually fared pretty well through COVID, and many, many people have been better educated as a result of that pandemic. That public space that I mentioned, as you can see, is meant to be very dynamic, very interactive. There'll be programs here. There are conference pods, we call them pods, that overhang the public space. And we have an agreement that these spaces can be used by nonprofits. So the idea is to find a space where all of Boston can connect. We will program different types of events in this space. There is food and beverage available, both on the mezzanine level and the ground floor. The office is here. Below grade, there is parking. The majority of that parking is stackers. And this defines the bottom of our passive house office space. So there was, I won't say an easy way to differentiate, but there was a way for us to differentiate, to be able to test the passive house components within the mixed use building. From the park looking back, again, you can kind of see where the passive house is defined. In other words, this glazing is kind of stick-built curtain wall. This is your triple glazed passive house wall. We also, being well and wanting to adhere to attracting tenants who are interested in, fresh air and all the attributes of well, we had a patio. So that was a challenge from passive house, just to be able to get the balcony doors to work and to make sure that, that was a helpful thing. In the building, there are amenities for the tenants. That's kind of a requirement. We were heading that way even before COVID. Now, as a plea to get employees to come back to work, most tenants want to see some great meeting spaces, spaces where their employees can enjoy such amenities as a sports simulator, a gym, a coffee bar and a lounge. And this also served as a way for tenants to have swing space. One of the things we noticed in marketing the office space is a lot of tenants really don't know how much space they're going to need. They're still developing their new work models. So this allowed them, if they didn't build enough conference spaces, okay, there's conference spaces here, there's meeting rooms, and these spaces can be reserved for individual tenants. So this gave them that flexibility as they made their decision to rent space. We also found that tenants who were in the market and had to make a decision about, am I going to rent more office space? Am I going to move? A lot of tenants wanted to upgrade to a building that is, you know, married their values. And that was one thing we learned, that Passive House, you know, you go on a lot of folks' websites and you see that they talk about climate change. And so we challenge them to put their money where their mouth is. Why would they not be in a building that promotes climate change if that's part of their values? Again, this is the coffee bar and the after work you can gather. It's also that human connection that I think people realized they needed, having gone through the pandemic. And the learning area and the learning steps, co-working area, again, all kind of, you know, an important component of how we're going to work together in the future, how we want these collaborative spaces, how we may not want to just go 9 to 5 in our own office, but be able to mingle with other workers in the same building. Fitness center. And a typical office is, the layout is 38,000 square feet. So that's not easily available in the city of Boston. A lot of the, even the Class A that's available is more in the 20 to 22,000 square foot floor plate. So the 38,000 allows for tenants to get on one floor if that's what they're interested in doing. And we had originally designed the building for benching and cramming a lot of people in. That isn't the way architects are designing anymore. So the Winthrop Center allows for a lot of what they call neighborhoods and collaboration spaces. So we were able to pivot with this building once we figured out what the market was asking for. Traditional Class A, you kind of saw these type of windows. A lot of people, when they talked about Passive House, were very concerned that we wouldn't be able to take advantage of extra glazing. But in fact, at Winthrop Center, this is what we have. So we have maximized the glass where we can. And there are areas where we don't have views, and that's where we went with solid panel walls. We do, all of this glass is triple glazed. And then we actually have an additional wall that you build on top of the curtain wall. So one thing I say to tenants is the landlord has done all of this very hardy exterior wall, and you, tenant, will benefit from both the thermal comfort and the energy savings that you'll experience. And we all know energy costs are going up dramatically. So that energy savings is going to start to be more and more part of our conversations. We were able to easily quote the 65% energy savings that Winthrop Center will provide, because the city of Boston actually requires what's called BERTO. That's building energy. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get the acronym right, but you have to report every year how much energy your building is consuming. So the data already exists in the City of Boston website. So we could take our model and we could compare it to other Class A buildings right in our own neighborhood and we could easily make that claim that this building will save 65% on your energy cost. I'm not going to go into all the attributes of passive house because I think most people on this call know what those are. But I want to talk a little bit more about what it means for our marketing and how we had to pivot and educate kind of corporate America. I think most tenants are very familiar now with LEED. They may not even know what it means, but they know if they're going into a building, it's a question they have to ask. So we had to spend quite a bit of time educating what passive house meant and why as a tenant you should care about it. And we stumbled upon ESG, which now is a pretty common language, but 2-3 years ago, it was just starting to surface. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. And this is where we were able to connect with tenants and say, look, if you're out on Wall Street saying that you're ESG, then how can your real estate not be part of that story? And Winthrop Center really provided the tenants with an opportunity to say, and we're in a building that espouses the same values as we espouse. So it went even beyond passive house. It went to what are we doing with transportation provisions? What are we doing with clean energy? What's our diversity and inclusion program? And what kind of workforce and what kind of health and safety are we providing for their employees? So passive house became part of this ESG story, and it really worked. You can see a quote here. Cambridge Associates was our first tenant. We went directly to the CEO and we basically said, you know, I don't know how you could go to any other building because you are telling your clients and you're saying that you're part of an environmentally sensitive building, you know, sensitive program. So therefore your real estate should be part of this. So you can see their quote, Winthrop Center's bold commitment to sustainability drove the firm's decision to move. So this story, this passive house, and this is the message I like to give to other developers, when the market demands it, then you're going to want to build it. And even though we all want to do the right thing, it really helps when it also aligns with what corporate America wants. And so we have 3 tenants now, McKinsey, Cambridge Associates, and a company called Internal Research and Management, all very high-end quality tenants. And we didn't sacrifice the traditional views that people expect in Class A. As you can see, the passive house facade is a beautiful facade. You can do a lot of architectural things with it. The plywood is not part of the architecture. That's where the crane ties were. So we're just working that out. You could see the exterior balconies that contribute to our well program. And now I would like to stop talking and entertain questions.